Hi, I'm Steve Good and welcome to my Scroll Saw Workshop. Out in the shop tonight to put together a project that I think you guys are going to enjoy. It's a little wooden padlock with a little wooden key. And I'm going to zoom in here on it and show you how it works and give you some details on how I put this together so you can make your own. Okay, here's a close-up view of this padlock we're going to be working on tonight, and I'll give you a little example of how it works. Just like any padlock, it's got the shank up here that's held tight. Use the wooden key, insert it into the hole, turn the key, and open the shank. And then when you remove the key, of course the shank locks back down in. So this is a fun project. I've seen this done a few times in books, and also saw the same project or a real similar project on YouTube. And as I watched it, I just couldn't help but want to design and build one of my own. So I'm going to take the front off of this now and show you the mechanism that locks it in place. And you'll be able to download the pattern for this lock at the Scroll Saw Workshop, which is scrollsawworkshop.blogspot.com. Here are the pieces to the padlock with the front removed. And what you're going to need to build this project are the plans off my blog at www.scrollsawworkshop.blogspot.com. You will need a sheet of 3/8 inch Baltic birch ply, which is what I've made this one out of, but you can use hardwood also. You will need some 1/2 inch dowel rod, which is what I used for the key. You will need some 1/4 inch dowel rods, which are what hold some of the pieces together. What you're going to do is you're going to cut out all the pieces. You're going to insert these two longer dowel rods into the back in the pre-drilled hole, into the holes that show you in the pattern. You're going to insert this shorter dowel rod, which is 1/2 inch long, into the back, and that dowel rod is what will line up the key. And you can see that there's a 17/64 inch hole drilled into the end of the key. When you insert the key through the keyhole, it will line up with that dowel right there. The pieces of our padlock are this piece right here, we're calling the shank. This piece right here is the locking bar, and it's what moves to release the shank. This piece right here, I'm calling the pivot in the pattern, and of course this is the key. When you insert the key into the dowel rod and you turn the key will come up and contact the bottom of the pivot. As you continue to turn, the pivot will push up on the locking bar, which will unlock the shank. Then when you are ready to relock the padlock, you just simply push back down and it'll snap back into place. So it's as simple as that. Let me show you a couple of things to be aware of while you're building it. Let's start out with the key. The key is, again, a 1/2 inch piece of hardwood dowel. I used a 3/8 inch piece of Baltic birch ply to make this tooth right here, and a 1/4 inch Baltic birch ply to make the little handle on the end of the key. I took the scroll saw and I cut out the space, which you'll see in the pattern, for this 1/8 inch piece of Baltic birch ply to fit into. When you insert the key onto this, you need this tooth to be below the surface of the center section right here, so that when you get it in there, it fits between the front and the back. And again, that'll be in the pattern. So that the key is pretty simple to make. You just put a couple of cuts in each end and apply the pieces. A couple things to be aware of when you're making the shank and the pivot is that the holes in both of those pieces need to be 17/64 of an inch, because they need to pivot freely. And if they were drilled at a 1/4 of an inch, they would bind. So you want that nice loose fit right there. Also, after you cut the pivot and the shank, you want to sand them down just a few hundredths of an inch thinner so that they don't bind when the front and back are put together. In other words, when you put the front on, you want that to still pivot. and if they were 3/8 of an inch thick, they're a little tight. So just sand them down just a little bit, just enough to get them free. Same thing with the shank. You want it to move free when the front's installed on it. This is a prototype, and the pieces you see right here are pieces that I added after I designed the project that I needed to change a little bit, but the pattern that you download will look a little different, and all these extra pieces here will be on the pattern. The locking bar is basically a leaf spring is what it is, and it is a separate piece from the centerpiece, and I did not glue it in because you have to experiment, maybe sand this down and change it several times to get this proportion right here to where it slips right here between the shank and the locking bar. You want that to be pretty accurate, so you may have to make a couple of them and sand them until you get them right. But you want this piece right here of the locking bar to fit into the centerpiece very tight. So this is not glued into this area, but it's stuck in there pretty tight, so pay attention to that when you're making it. This dowel rod that the key goes on is only a 1/2 inch long because you don't want it to come above the surface of the center section of the lock. That's pretty much the details of how the lock works. When you put the front back on and glue everything up, you'll want to go through and sand all the edges real good, round over the corners and all that. But you want to make sure before you put your glue in to put the front in that everything's working the way you want. So do all your experimenting with the front off. Okay, and what I did is when I started building it, I didn't even glue the center section on until I had everything pretty much right in case I needed to make any changes. I just held it on there real tight and played with the locking mechanism until I got it working the way I wanted it. The very last thing to do, of course, is to go ahead and put a little glue in these areas of the centerpiece, slide these onto the dowels, and then glue it all up. So a little bit of a complicated project because as you're building it, you'll have to make some changes. You got to do some sanding. You got to get all the mechanism working right. So it takes a little patience, but not too bad. And again, you can download the patterns from www.scrollsawworkshop.blogspot.com. Hope you enjoy this project, and I'll see you next time here at Scroll Saw Workshop.